Hey everyone, we're diving into Letting Go today by David R. Hawkins.
Oh, excellent choice.
It's a powerful book,
It's
and it
fair.
seems like a lot of you are really interested in this whole concept of surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Letting go of the stuff that keeps us, stuck, feeling overwhelmed, frustrated by the same old problems
Yeah.
popping up again and again.
Same patterns.
Right, exactly. And, I think we've all been there.
Yeah, we have.
So we're going to explore Hawkins's take on surrender as a potential way out
I love it.
of that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But first, some big questions.
Okay.
Is it even possible to hold on to happiness?
Interesting question.
What's the real cost of all that negativity we lug around with us?
Oh, big cost.
Yeah, and is there actually a way to break free from it all?
I love that question.
So to help us unpack all this, I've got an expert guide with me today
Oh.
who's incredible at making sense of these complex psychological concepts.
Well, I appreciate that. And you're right, Hawkins does dive into some pretty big ideas.
He does.
But he starts with something I think we can all relate to,
Uh-huh.
which is this idea of, he calls it the human dilemma.
Okay.
It's that feeling of being on a hamster wheel, right?
Right.
Like you're trying to fix things, but you're ultimately just running in place.
Oh, I know that feeling well.
Think about a time in your own life
Okay.
when you thought you'd finally solved a problem,
Mm-hmm.
only to have it, or something very similar,
Oh, yeah.
reappear later on down the line.
All the time.
Hawkins would argue that this cycle
Yeah.
is fueled by our inability to let go of negative emotions.
So you're saying it's more than just having a bad day. Like these emotions actually have a lasting impact.
That's right. It's like carrying around a backpack full of rocks.
Oh, I like that. That's a great analogy.
So Hawkins goes as far as to say that these repressed emotions, they actually shape our thoughts, even our memories.
Really?
And it's not just psychological either. He talks about research that shows how negative emotions can even weaken us physically. For example, there was a study where they found that muscle strength decreased by 50%.
50%. Seriously?
When people were experiencing negative emotion,
That's way more than I would have guessed.
it is wild.
Wow. I mean, it makes you wonder what else we're holding ourselves back from
Right.
just by clinging to all that negativity.
Absolutely.
So how does this idea of surrender fit into all of this? Because I got to be honest, when I hear surrender, I think giving up white flag, waving the white flag.
Right. And it's definitely not about Hawkins is talking about something far more active
Okay.
and empowering. He defines surrender as a conscious process.
Okay.
You acknowledge the feeling, you accept that it's there, and then this is the key.
Go ahead.
You release it. It's about shifting from a feeling of being controlled by those emotions
Right.
to a place where you are back in the driver's seat.
I'm starting to see how that could be powerful.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that story he tells about the man who lost his passport.
Oh, right.
The more he freaked out, the more his mind went blank.
Couldn't remember a thing.
But it was only when he actually, allowed himself to feel the grief of potentially missing that trip
Yeah.
that he suddenly remembered where it was.
It's amazing how that works, right?
Totally.
Mm.
It's like that tight grip on the negative emotion was actually blocking the solution
Blocking the solution.
from coming through.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we actually do this letting go thing?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Right? I mean, are there techniques?
There are, and I'm curious to dig into those with you.
Yes, me too. But before we get too practical,
Okay.
there's this whole map of consciousness idea that I want to touch on.
Yes.
Because it seems like Hawkins is saying there are different levels of,
Levels of being.
Yeah.
It's like a ladder.
okay?
You've got fear, anger, pride on those lower levels.
Right.
As you move up, you start to experience more courage, acceptance, and ultimately love.
And each level has a different energy.
Yes, a different vibration.
So is he saying that some emotions are just flat out bad?
It's not so much about good versus bad
Alright.
as it is recognizing that some emotions are more aligned with, say, a sense of inner peace and well-being
Okay.
than others. Think about the times you felt really courageous.
Mm-hmm.
You probably made different choices,
Right.
showed up differently in the world
For sure.
than when you were operating from a place of fear.
Absolutely. Like that time I had to give a presentation at work,
Oh, yeah.
and I was terrified,
Uh-huh.
and it showed.
Oh, no.
I stumbled over my words. I avoided eye contact.
We've all been there.
It was a mess.
Yeah.
But then that other time, when I was actually excited about the project,
Yes.
I actually enjoyed presenting.
You see?
And the energy was just completely different.
Higher vibration.
It was. Okay, so Hawkins would say I was operating from a higher level of consciousness.
In that second presentation, absolutely.
Wow. Now I'm thinking about how these levels might show up in other areas of my life. Like, how do I react when I'm dealing with a difficult boss or
Yeah.
facing a financial challenge? Like that kind of stuff.
It's a great tool to use.
Okay. I'm seeing how this map could be really useful. It's like having a guide to understand where I am emotionally,
Where you
where you could potentially go.
Where I could go, yeah. But how do we actually move up those levels?
That's the question.
That's where those letting go techniques come in, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But before we jump into the how-to,
Okay.
I think it's important to touch on the benefits
Okay.
of this whole surrender thing.
Yeah, because you mentioned that Hawkins makes some pretty big claims
He does.
about how it can impact our lives.
He does.
And I want to make sure we cover those.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so we're not talking about just achieving some kind of permanent bliss.
No.
It's more like equipping ourselves to handle
Right.
whatever life throws our way.
It is. And that's where those techniques for letting go come in.
You know, we talked about how those unprocessed negative emotions, they can actually drain our energy
they can.
and keep us stuck. Hawkins' techniques are all about reclaiming that energy and putting ourselves back in control.
Let's dive into those techniques.
Let's do it.
Where do we even begin?
Well, it all starts with willingness.
Okay.
You have to be willing to look at those negative feelings, you know?
Yeah.
The stuff that we often try to push down or ignore. Hawkins even uses this term, the shadow self.
Oh, yeah, the shadow self.
To describe those parts of ourselves we tend to hide.
Yeah.
You know, maybe because they make us uncomfortable.
Like, what kind of stuff are we talking about here?
Oh, it could be jealousy. It could be anger. It could even be a fear of success.
Oh.
Anything that we deem unacceptable.
So you're saying we have to actually acknowledge those shadow parts of ourselves?
We do.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
It does.
But Hawkins would argue that it's only by confronting those hidden aspects that we can truly free ourselves from their grip.
Okay.
It's like shining a light on the monster under the bed.
Right.
Often it turns out to be much less scary than we imagine.
That's true.
Think about that time that you felt incredibly envious when a colleague got promoted.
Oh, yeah.
That could be your shadow self trying to tell you something about your own ambitions and fears.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So once we're willing to see those shadow parts, what's next? How do we actually let go of the negative feelings that they bring up?
Well, the letting go process itself is surprisingly simple.
Okay.
Though not always easy.
Right.
Hawkins breaks it down into 3 steps.
Oh.
Acknowledging the feeling.
Okay.
Accepting it. And then releasing it.
And he uses that analogy of watching a cloud float by.
Oh, yes, I love that analogy.
Right. You notice it. You acknowledge it's there.
Right.
But you don't try to grab it or control it.
You just observe it.
You simply observe it as it drifts on by.
Beautiful.
But how do we actually release a feeling? It seems kind of abstract.
It is abstract, and there are different ways to approach it.
Okay.
It can be helpful to actually name the feeling that you're experiencing. You know, say it out loud or write it down.
Why?
Sometimes just giving it a label helps to create some distance between you and the emotion.
Okay.
Then Hawkins talks about making a conscious choice to let it go.
Right.
You can visualize it dissolving. Imagine it floating away like a balloon.
Okay.
Or simply surrender it to something greater than yourself.
Right.
Whatever that might be.
So it's almost like a mental act of surrender.
It is.
Like we're saying, okay, I see you fear.
Yep.
But I'm not going to let you control me anymore.
Exactly.
And don't worry if it feels a little awkward or forced at first.
Of course.
You know, the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
You got it.
It's like building a muscle.
Absolutely. And Hawkins also talks about this idea of recontextualizing our experiences.
Okay, recontextualize.
It's about shifting our perspective on past events, especially those that have caused us pain or trauma.
So instead of seeing those events as something that happened to us, we can choose to see them as something that happened for us.
You got it.
Okay.
It's not about denying the pain or pretending it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's about looking for the lesson, the growth, the strength that emerged from that experience.
So it's like watching a movie with a different soundtrack.
Oh, I love that.
Right. The same scenes can feel completely different.
Totally.
Depending on the music.
Absolutely.
Think about a time in your life when you went through something really challenging. What did you learn from that experience?
Yeah.
How did it shape you into the person you are today?
Such a good point.
Okay. I see what you're saying. It's about finding the silver lining
Yes.
even in the toughest situations.
Yes.
But what about those times when we're just surrounded by negativity?
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to stay positive when everyone around us is complaining
Yeah.
or gossiping or just bringing that negative energy.
Yeah, and that's why Hawkins emphasizes the importance of choosing our environment wisely.
Oh, okay.
We're constantly being influenced
Yeah,
by the people and situations around us.
for sure.
So if we're surrounded by negativity, it's going to be much harder
Right.
to maintain a positive state of mind.
It's like that saying, you are the company you keep.
Exactly.
I'm picturing myself walking through a field of flowers,
Okay.
and then suddenly I'm in a junkyard.
Oh.
Like the energy is just completely different.
It is.
Yeah.
And this applies not just to the people in our lives, but
Right.
also to the information we consume,
Oh,
the media we engage with, even the physical spaces we inhabit.
okay.
So create an environment that supports
Okay.
your growth and well-being.
Okay, I like that. So it's about being mindful of the energy we're taking in
Yes.
from the world around us.
Absolutely.
What else does Hawkins suggest?
Well, if we're being mindful of the energy we're taking in,
Right.
it makes sense that we also need to be mindful of the energy we're putting out.
Okay.
And a big part of that is choosing our thoughts consciously.
So instead of dwelling on negative thoughts,
Mm.
we can choose to focus on things
Yes.
that make us feel good, things that inspire us, things that bring us joy.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this isn't about denying the reality
Right.
of difficult situations or pretending that everything is perfect.
Yeah.
It's about training your mind to look for the good, to appreciate the beauty, to find that silver lining,
Yeah.
even in the midst of challenges.
This is really making me think about the language I use with myself.
Oh, interesting.
Do I focus on what's wrong? Or do I make an effort to acknowledge what's going right?
What a great question to ask yourself.
It's a subtle shift, but it feels powerful.
It is powerful. When we focus on the good, we feel better.
Hmm.
When we feel better, we're more likely to make positive choices. Right.
And when we make positive choices, we create a more positive reality
Yeah.
for ourselves and those around us.
I'm starting to see how all of these techniques are interconnected.
Me too.
It's like we're weaving a tapestry of positive energy.
I love that.
By being mindful of our environment,
Yeah.
our thoughts, and the way we process our experiences.
It's about cultivating a more positive
Yeah,
and empowering way of being in the world.
that's a great way to put it. And there's one more technique that I think is essential to this process.
Okay, what is it?
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
How does that fit into the whole letting go thing?
Well, think about it this way. Holding on to resentment and anger is like drinking poison
Oh, wow.
and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
It's us who suffers the most
Yeah.
when we refuse to forgive.
So it's not about the other person at all.
It's not.
That's a tough one to swallow, but I can see how holding on to anger
Mm-hmm.
would just keep me tethered to the past, to the hurt. Exactly. Hawkins emphasizes that forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves.
Okay.
It's a way to break free from the past and move forward with greater peace and clarity.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense.
Right.
We're talking about being willing to see our shadow selves.
Yeah.
Consciously choosing to let go of negative emotions, surrounding ourselves with positive influences,
Yes.
shifting our perspective on past events, choosing our thoughts, and practicing forgiveness.
Beautiful.
It's like we're creating a whole new operating system for our minds.
And I think what's so exciting about all of this is
Yeah.
that it's not just about feeling better.
Right.
It's about living better.
Yeah.
Hawkins argues that these techniques can actually help us to show up differently
Yeah.
in every area of our lives.
So we're not just talking about personal growth, we're talking about practical application.
Absolutely.
How does all this translate into our relationships, our work,
Yes.
even our finances?
That's a great question, and I think it's a perfect place to pause for now. Let's take a moment to let all of this sink in,
Okay.
and then come back to explore how we can actually put surrender into practice
Sounds good.
in those specific areas of our lives.
So we've talked about those techniques,
Okay.
but now I'm really curious to see how all of this actually plays out in our daily lives.
Yeah. It's one thing to talk about it, it's another to actually live it.
Right, exactly.
Mm.
So let's start with relationships,
Yeah.
because those can be
Oh, boy, can they?
real emotional roller coasters
Yeah, they are.
sometimes.
Absolutely. And Hawkins highlights something that I think a lot of us can relate to, which is that we often approach relationships with this underlying sense of incompleteness, like we're looking for someone else to fix us or make us happy.
So instead of like taking responsibility for our own happiness. We're putting all this pressure on our partners
Yes.
to meet our needs.
It's so common. And when they inevitably fall short,
Right.
because let's be honest, everyone does sometimes.
Everyone does.
We end up feeling disappointed, frustrated.
Resentful.
You're resentful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where the idea of surrender can be so transformative. It's about releasing that need to control the other person,
Right.
to mold them into our ideal image.
Okay, so less about trying to change our partner
Yes.
and more about changing our approach to the relationship.
It's about accepting them for who they are, flaws and all,
Yeah.
and focusing on what we can control, our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This might involve letting go of unrealistic expectations, learning to communicate our needs more effectively, being willing to compromise. It's about shifting from a mindset of getting what we want from the relationship
Right.
to a mindset of giving love, support, and understanding.
Okay, so instead of focusing on what's missing, we're choosing to appreciate what's already there.
Yes. What about work?
Go work.
I know, right? So many people are struggling with stress burnout, feeling stuck in jobs that don't bring them joy.
It's tough out there.
It is. How can surrender help in that area?
It's a good question.
Well, Hawkins suggests that our perception of work is often driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of scarcity. We end up overworking, people-pleasing, constantly seeking external validation.
Oh, that's me for sure.
And ironically, that can lead to decreased productivity.
Really?
And as you mentioned, burnout.
I've definitely been there, pushing myself to the limit, thinking that's the only way to succeed.
It's a common trap, but it always backfires eventually.
It always does.
Surrender in the context of work is about shifting away from that fear-based mindset
Okay.
and tapping into something deeper.
Like what?
Your passion, your purpose, your joy. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to your job title or your paycheck, but to your inherent value as a human being.
Ooh, I like that.
Remember what we talked about with the map of consciousness? It's about approaching your work from a higher level of being, a place of courage and inspiration rather than fear and insecurity.
So instead of forcing ourselves to fit into a mold,
Right.
we're encouraged to find work that aligns with who we truly are and what we're passionate about.
Absolutely. This might involve letting go of certain ambitions, setting healthier boundaries, and prioritizing your well-being. It's not about being lazy or giving up on your goals. It's about creating a more sustainable and fulfilling way of working. And that brings us to another area where surrender can be incredibly powerful. Finances.
Okay. Yes, money. Money is definitely a source of stress for a lot of people,
It is a big one.
myself included.
It's interesting because Hawkins points out that our relationship with money often reflects our deeper beliefs about ourselves. If we believe we're unworthy or undeserving, we might struggle to attract abundance.
Okay.
If we're constantly focused on scarcity, that's what we're likely to experience. It's like we're putting up these energetic blocks that prevent money from flowing freely into our lives.
So it's not just about budgeting or investing wisely.
Right.
It's about shifting our internal state around money.
Yes. Surrender in this context is about letting go of those limiting beliefs and cultivating a mindset of abundance. It's about trusting that you're supported by the universe, that you have everything you need, and that money is simply a tool that flows in and out of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Think about a time when you felt truly abundant, maybe not in a financial sense, but just in a general sense of having enough, of being enough. What did that feel like? What thoughts and beliefs were you holding on to in that moment?
It's like that feeling of deep gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Appreciating what we already have instead of constantly focusing on what we lack.
Exactly. And that gratitude is a powerful magnet for attracting even more abundance into our lives. It's not about ignoring practical matters like budgeting or saving. It's about approaching those things from a place of trust and ease rather than fear and scarcity.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I agree.
It's like Hawkins is offering us a whole new lens through which to view our lives.
He is. And what I find so inspiring about his work is that it's not just about personal growth. It's about creating a ripple effect of positive change in the world. When we surrender to the present moment, when we let go of negativity and embrace a mindset of love, compassion, and abundance, we don't just transform our own lives, we contribute to a more peaceful, joyful, and harmonious world for everyone.
That's beautifully said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. If I had to sum up the biggest takeaway from this deep dive into letting go, it would be this. Surrender is not about giving up. It's about letting go of the things that are no longer serving us, the negative thoughts, the limiting beliefs, the fear-based behaviors, so we can open ourselves up to the peace, joy, and fulfillment that are our birthright.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this exploration of letting go, I want to leave you with this question. What area of your life feels the most constricted right now? Where are you holding on too tightly? And what would it look like to simply surrender, to let go, and to trust that something beautiful and unexpected is waiting to emerge? Allow yourself to sit with that question, to explore it, and to discover for yourself the transformative power of surrender.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and happy letting go.
Did you get any of that?